The war of words between the Democratic and Republican frontrunners is escalating. Donald Trump took to the Sunday shows yesterday to criticize Hillary Clinton. This comes as Bill Clinton is set to hit the campaign trail on behalf of his wife. Well, today, Donald Trump tweeted, "If Hillary thinks she can unleash her husband with his terrible record of women abuse while playing the women's card on me, she's wrong." With us now is Carrie Sheffield, founder of Bold and senior writer for Opportunity Lives. Carrie, thanks for being with us.
Thanks.
It's so fascinating to watch this. What do you make of this latest round of attacks?
Well, I think it's his response to some criticism from Hillary and her team saying that he was sexist or misogynist and too aggressive toward women. So that's his pushback, is to blame her husband. That's what he's trying to do. So he's trying to go on offense instead of defense.
Is there a chance that that strategy could backfire?
I think that it very well could, simply because Bill Clinton is incredibly popular. I mean, most Americans already know about the scandal. It's decades old at this point. So for him to rehash that, I think the only people who it could rile up is his base. And that could be a strategy that he's going for, but it's going to really hurt him unless he can figure out how to pivot for the general.
Things haven't hurt him, though, before, up until this point. I mean, we've been here before where we've talked about, can this hurt him? Might that hurt him? This comment about veterans, this comment about Senator John McCain. Are there things in this you see that are different, perhaps, about this line of attack?
Well, I think people are now starting to turn to the general. And, you know, we were talking earlier about whether people will actually come out and vote in the primaries for Donald. That's a very different story from him winning in the polls. But if the polls are true and he does end up eking out a win for the general, to go to the general to get the nomination, it could be very problematic for him because people are not as forgiving in the general as they are in the primary, women in particular. ABC had polling that showed by a 2-to-1 margin, women have a negative view toward him. That's for women more broadly compared to women just in the GOP.
So with Donald Trump turning his attention sort of to the general here and attacking Hillary Clinton, what does that mean for the other Republican candidates? Could that give them a little bit of room here to run while Donald Trump is focused ostensibly, at least, on Hillary Clinton?
Well, Trump's, his candidates within the Republican Party are very fractured, so he is outpacing them. So I think what we'd have to see is a consolidation of the opposition against him. So we'd have to see people dropping out, like maybe a Jeb dropping out, Chris Christie dropping out. So sort of the more mainstream lane would be consolidated behind someone like a Marco Rubio. That could pose a formidable challenge. But right now, Trump has been able to fend off everyone. First it was Scott Walker, then it was Jeb Bush, and even now Ted Cruz and Ben Carson. So I think that's what he's doing.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Okay.
What do you think the time frame is for that, where we'll start to see more of this consolidation that everybody, frankly, has been talking about for some time? We haven't seen it happen yet.
Well, you know, I think people are holding out Jeb, for example. They want to see if, again, Trump's supporters on paper will actually show up in person to vote. And if it turns out that they aren't coming out, let's say by March, then I think Jeb would get more steam. He would stay in for sure. But if it turns out that Trump's support is real and people are showing at the polls, then you might see someone like Jeb pull out or Chris Christie pull out. It really comes down to, I think, New Hampshire is a very pivotal state. Iowa has been less important in terms of being an indicator of who's going to win the actual nomination. So I think most of the candidates have conceded that to someone like Ben Carson or probably a Ted Cruz. So we'll see. By March, I think we'll have a lot more clarity.
What does it say about the state of the race right now that Donald Trump has been going after Hillary Clinton in this way, a very direct way? Meantime, we just showed that slate up there. It still looks very crowded on the Republican side. It
is very crowded, but he is able to have his own lane where he is pulling very strongly within the Republican Party. So it is clearly him saying, peace out, Republicans, I'm moving on. So let's just move to the next phase. And
it's pretty
also
bold, pretty bold.
Yeah, but, well, okay,
Donald Trump, right?
yeah. Hey, in general, I like bold things. But I also think it's him acknowledging that Hillary is the out-and-out winner of the Democratic primary as well, because he's attacking him and not really her and not really caring about Bernie Sanders or Martin O'Malley or any other Democrat. So
you know, you mentioned Bill Clinton being highly popular. It's interesting to think about a possible dynamic there where you would have a personality like a Donald Trump being confronted by a personality like Bill Clinton, both of whom are larger than life, I think, by any objective measure. What might that look like? Could it get really ugly?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Well, I personally, as a conservative, I think that Donald Trump would be a terrible candidate for Republicans if they actually want to win. Again, if you look at the polling, Trump always says, I got to win, I got to care about winning. When you put him up against Hillary Clinton, he doesn't win. He's actually the weakest Republican compared to Jeb, compared to Cruz, compared to Rubio. So he's going to have to do some explaining and some changing in terms of moving to the general. And I think that that's a problem that he would have going against Clinton, because the Clinton legacy compared to the Trump legacy is much more favorable in terms of public perception.
Let me ask you this, Carrie. As a conservative, I'll have you put your conservative hat on
Sure.
very, very tightly here. Are there any kind of red flags when you talk about conservative principles, things that you have heard from Donald Trump, from the campaign, that don't seem to comport themselves with the traditional values of a conservative Republican primary voter?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, at a personal level, he's been divorced multiple times. He's been living a lifestyle that's incredibly luxurious. He's really not a person who lives the life of a common man, even though he likes to pretend that he does. He doesn't live a conservative lifestyle. His policies are not conservative, whether that's increasing taxes or supporting the seizing of property rights, whether that's restricting free trade. So these really core conservative principles, like keeping taxes low instead of raising taxes, which he wants to do, he's not a true conservative, which is why he's drawn the ire of people like Charles Krathaumer, George Will, Bill Kristol, kind of the conservative stalwarts who are saying, hey, this really isn't a Ronald Reagan type figure, as much as he says that he is the natural heir to Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan's own descendants have said that Donald Trump is an embarrassment and would be a bad nominee. So that's just my personal opinion.
Though, and yet there he is, far ahead of the nearest Republican
and to be
contender.
fair, he's not claiming that he's conservative, and his supporters readily admit that. I think they're just wanting someone who's so far away from the establishment. That's what they want. And they also want someone who talks strong, talks like they're going to change things completely from what we've seen in the White House. And admittedly, as a conservative, I have not been satisfied with what Barack Obama has done. I think that he's shown considerable weakness in terms of what's happened to American strength around the world, what's happened in the Middle East, the chaos, what's happened against Russia. So I sort of understand why they're upset about the weakness that we've seen coming from the White House as a conservative, but I don't think that Donald Trump is the answer to that.
Who is the standard bearer when you look at that field of candidates? Is there someone there who is capable of carrying forward the kind of conservative agenda that you and other conservatives are interested in putting forward in this country?
Right. Well, I mean, I haven't personally chosen a horse in this race. I think that there are people who have records, like a Jeb Bush. He was a very conservative governor. He managed his state very well fiscally. I was a bond analyst at Moody's. He got an upgrade while he was governor. I think
Common Core problematic, though, from a conservative standpoint. There were people who said federal government needs to get out when it comes to the issue of education. That's something that needs to be kept at the local level. And Jeb Bush was a supporter of Common Core, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah. It's true. And then that's sort of been one kind of red flag against conservatives. But it's just remarkable how, in so many other ways, Jeb Bush is so much more conservative than Donald Trump, and yet
he's at 4% in that.
Yeah, no, I mean it really comes down to, in so many ways, the showmanship and the personality and just the bravado. People want that. It speaks to them at a very visceral level, and I understand that. As I said, going back to talking about strength or the lack thereof that we've seen, in some ways I think it's just very disappointing to have such a weak presence in the White House now, and to kind of swing the polar opposite. I think most people want something in the middle, and that's something that some of the other candidates are more speaking about, whether it's John Kasich or Marco Rubio.
Ted Cruz, is that someone that you look to as perhaps being a potential conservative candidate and someone who could put forth the kind of conservative agenda that you're interested in?
It's interesting. I think a lot of observers have said that the race, if Trump's supporters don't actually come to the polls, this is actually going to come down to a Cruz versus Rubio. And that's what's going to happen, that we'll see Trump kind of fade away the way that we've seen Ben Carson fade away. And I think that Cruz, would have been probably too conservative for the most mainstream conservatives or Republicans right now, but because of what Trump's done, he's really changed the mold of what's acceptable. I think that Ted Cruz is more viable because of Donald Trump.
All right, a lot of playbooks being rewritten after this election cycle.
It's an earthquake.
An earthquake, exactly. Carrie Sheffield, founder of Bold and senior writer for Opportunity Lives. Thank you so much for your perspective, Carrie.
Thanks.
Appreciate
Great
it.
to be here.